What is up? Welcome to Making the Grade, where we look at the PFF grades from the most recent games. I am your host, TCR, and we're going to get into the grades and talk about the Cardinals. I'm having a little bit of camera issues, so if there's a lag there, I apologize. Hopefully, y'all can hear me. Let me know if you're experiencing that on your end. I restarted my computer and tried a million different things. I don't know what's doing this. Same setup I use every week. Yay. But we're going to talk about the Cardinals win. And yes, thank you, Mizaki Felix. It was a win. We loved seeing that. It was a gutsy win. It was a gritty win against a team that's tough defensively. We'll talk about that. So we'll take it, right? And, Don Hill saying, who are these guys and where have they been all season? I hope we didn't just reveal a horrible offensive line in San Diego, hoping for a quick recovery for Dennis Gardeck. He was making a real impact this year. Unfortunately, Gardecki's out for the season, which is we were very limited on pass rush, and that's definitely a big loss. But I don't think we just exposed a bad offensive line, although I do think our pass rush is up and down. It's inconsistent, and it's just going to be that way sometime. But Mizaki Felix saying definitely got bailed out by 2 turnovers again, but a win was a win. Yeah, I mean, listen, yeah, it wasn't pretty for either team, really, right? So we'll get into let's get right into it. Let's kind of start. The game was a 17-15 win for the Cardinals. A game of kickers, right? The Chargers, literally everything they did was field goals. And the Cardinals won it on a walk-off field goal. In terms of raw stats, it wasn't, the rushing was pretty good. James Conner had 100 yards. Kyler Murray had 64 yards and one really nice run, obviously. Passing only 145 yards for Kyler, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The ESPN has their QBR 78.5, and then the traditional quarterback rating is 67. So something about the ESPN kind of QB, their ratings rated him better, so to speak. So, receiving, no one had a huge game, right? We had, a couple fumbles both ways. Did have 3 sacks, right, which is nice. And the Chargers, which have a really good defense, they did not get any sacks in Kyler Murray. 0 sacks against Kyler Murray. They were putting pressure on him, but he did a good job of evading that. So, Kyler Murray's raw stats weren't great, but something I really want to point out that you really have to take into consideration with the context with this game. The Chargers, even after this game, are allowing a league low 13.8 points per game. This is the stingiest defense in terms of points allowed in the league. And the Cardinals just put 17 up, so that was lower going. I think it was like 13-3 or something like that. You see a really stingy defense, 13.8 points per game. This is a team that you weren't going to blow them out. And it's part defense and it's also part game script, because they also play, kind of a style of offense that, runs the ball a lot and kind of takes their time getting down the field. So that slows down the game script and makes it hard to get those points. But they also have a very good defense, guys like Khalil Mack, right? And Joey Bosa and some really good players there. So if you're looking at this game and you're quibbling about the fact that Kyler Murray didn't have a lot of yards or that he didn't have a great game, no quarterbacks have had great games against this team. I tweeted out about it. I've looked at it. They have not given up a 300-yard passing game. No one's put a ton of, I think maybe a couple people have had 2 touchdowns on them. But every quarterback they've played against has had at least 1 interception. They've played some bad quarterbacks, but they also played Patrick Mahomes. So the point is, this is a really good defense, really stingy defense. And, Kyler avoiding sacks. And, he had the 1 interception that was a tipped pass, right? And then that was kind of, they bailed out with the fumble. But Kyler Murray playing against a really stingy defense that was not giving them a lot to work with, didn't make the big mistakes, that lost them the game. And he made a couple big plays like that run. You don't win the game without that run, right? And this, again, especially against this defense. So it wasn't his best game, but the degree of difficulty was pretty high in terms of the team they're playing against. So let's get into the grades. Often now, I tweeted out some preliminary grades. They had preliminary grades up last night. Now they have changed. In the tweet I sent out, I even said that in one of them that they may change, so we'll see, right? And some of them did change, right? So they put out the preliminary grades, which I hadn't seen them do before, and then they have people double check them and then they revise based on having multiple sets of eyes looking at them. So here on the offensive side, we've got Connor with the highest grade, right? Then McBride, Evan Brown, Cullen, Murray, 68.9. We'll talk about him a little bit more. His run grade really boosted that. But let's do what I like to do, which is start with the offensive line. So we're going to sort it by pass block snaps just to kind of get them near the top. Now, overall, the offensive line, was up and down. You see the pass blocking grade, with the exception of Isaiah Adams, was better than the run blocking grade. So, I think when you look at it, the Chargers got pressure on them, but the fact that they didn't get home on any sacks, that's probably part, related to these good grades on the pass blocking. The run blocking, Evan Brown, Tristan Cole, and Isaiah Adams were decent, but the other folks didn't grade as well. So I think the offensive line did an admirable job against a really good defense, and Kyler Murray did a good job avoiding things and as well. And I think they all kind of worked that out or worked together on that. Now, one thing I will want to know, and I tweeted out, the preliminary grade for Paris Johnson Jr. has gone down. It looks like the run blocking is probably the big thing that went down. So originally his grade was in the 60s, and Paris Johnson Jr. has been so consistent, and he's had good games every game. And this is his first grade that I would say is kind of a bad grade, 58.7. Kind of 60 is baseline, like nothing bad, nothing great. Like just if you just are very vanilla, did a basic job every time. And so this is just slightly below average. It's the run blocking, as you see, that brings it down. The pass blocking was still pretty solid. But if you look at offensive tackles, even some of the really good ones, you're going to see they all have most all of them have a few games that are low. So we're still loving the consistency we've seen from him. These just no terrible games. And even this was not, this is not an ugly red game, right? In terms of the color of here, the really low grade. This was just So, he still had an 80.7 PFF grade for the season. So I'm certainly not worried about that. That means he's about to fall off the wagon or anything. He's been really good, really consistent, and had, his worst game against the best defense in the NFL in terms of points allowed. So no, I'm not worried about it. But just noting, this was his lowest grade this year. So Froholt, had a solid game, especially pass blocking. Run blocking is a little bit lower, but he's, 62.1 overall, solid. Evan Brown had a really nice game, especially on the pass blocking, decent on the run blocking. This might have been his best game this year. Let's take a look. 72.9, tied for his best game this year. He's had a string of rough games. He's been better in pass blocking of late and not as good in run blocking. So it was nice to see him bring both of those up, right? Especially the run blocking where he struggled, and he was really good in the pass blocking. So a nice game from him. Hopefully we see that trend continue. I have liked the signing. I think he's brought stability to the right or the left guard spot that was really in flux last year. Would like to see him play better, but this is much better than what we've seen in the past. So raise the floor in that position. Beacham, good pass block, not so good run block, game for him. Cullen played really nice on 37 snaps. So, he has stepped in, and he was solid for them in limited play in the past. You look at like last year, maybe the grade was a little bit down, but he had some nice games last year in limited play. In the past, he's had decent grades as, limited play, not a full-time starter, right? So, he's shown that he can play at a good level, and he's now had 2 games in a row with grades in the 70s, right? So, he had a little bit of a rough spell the first couple games he's played, but he's filling in pretty nice, I'd say, as have a backup step in for Will Hernandez, to have grades in the 70s. We still love Will Hernandez and want him back, but you like to see him playing well. Isaiah Adams, his second game with some snaps here in a row, really good run blocking, not so good pass blocking. Overall, decent grade of 65.7. He played last week. and had 23 snaps, 20 this week. And, it was a very similar story. Good run blocking grade, needs to work on the pass blocking. And that seems to be, the deal with him. And he was, coming out, he's a physical guy that they really liked. And, those kinds of guys often will be a little bit better in the run blocking, so it's not surprising. So we need to see him get better at that pass blocking to really become a starter for this team. But, overall decent grade, just really rough in the pass blocking, even worse than it was last week. So want to see him continue to grow and develop that rookie. But it is nice to see him in the game getting some snaps and to see at least him doing the run blocking well. So let's see if he can get the pass blocking up. So that's the offensive line. Let's kind of go by position, go with the tight ends. Ryman didn't, his pass blocking was pretty good on 2 snaps pass blocking. His run blocking 66.1 was good on 16 snaps. So that's really what you want from him. So that was good to see the good blocking. The rest of the stuff, not so much. But again, he's a rookie, more of a blocker, good athlete. Want to see him develop as a better pass catcher. But if all he gives you this year is good blocking, in the role that we're looking for him, from him, we'll take that for his rookie year, right? A rookie tight end being on the field alone is a plus, right? Elijah Higgins, not a great game for him on 21 snaps. McBride, had a solid game. Of course, this is McBride. That's what he does, right? He's a star. So good game for him. So I like seeing that. Looking at the receivers. So let's see. Let's maybe see. I wonder if sorting this. No, we'll stay by position. Okay. Greg Dortch had the touchdown, but overall, aside from that, his grade was very meh. And this is kind of what we've seen from Greg Dortch. We love Dortch, and we were all hoping this was going to be a bigger season for him. But he's had a couple good games grade wise. He's but limited production. And I think it's more a statement of the offense as a whole. And there's been a lot of conversation about Drew Petzing and his need to get better or get out. So I don't know that that's all Dortch, but the grade was a little, he had the one really nice route in the touchdown, but aside from that was, didn't do much. In fact, let's see, he had, that was his only catch, right? 2 targets. So, you'd like to see the offense get going more and get more targets. So we got Dortch. We already looked at the offensive. Clayton Tune, his 3 snaps, the tush push. Nothing to say there other than he didn't get it done on the one thing that you had one job, right? You had one job and you couldn't get it done. It's not all on him. The offensive line certainly helped or didn't help with that, but we'll go through the wide receivers and come back to Murray actually. Marvin Harrison, had 2 catches. Let's see, 3 catches for 21 yards, but continues to just be much more invisible than we would like. Again, I think that's certainly part on the offense overall, but I want to see more from him. The grade wasn't great either. Michael Wilson didn't have a particularly good grade. The receivers all struggled, but again, this is probably more of a statement of the offense and also a statement maybe on the defense they were playing, right? So let's see. And real quick, we have Jackie in the house. Howdy, Joe. Being at the game was awesome. Glad you were able to make it and that you enjoyed the game. I mean, getting a win is awesome, right? And it was a close, tight win, that's for sure, right? So thank you for jumping in and hanging out with us, Jackie. It was great being on stream with you all this last week for your 100th episode of Redbird Red Zone podcast. Going back with the rest of the receivers, Michael Wilson, no one had a really good grade here amongst these receivers. Zach Pascal only on 2 snaps. Zay Jones, his debut, 11 snaps. Not so much, right? Let's see. So that's all the receivers. Let's look at the halfbacks. James Conner had a nice grade at 81.9. His passing grade, and that's I'm guessing, I believe the fumble was on a catch, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but his run grade and his run grade was 91.1, right? So just a really nice game for him aside from the fumble, right? So like seeing that. Demercado, D and Benson both had very average grades, right? But Connor was the man, right? There's a reason he was the thumbnail cover for this week's episode, right? Real quick, Mizaki is saying Harrison is worrying me. I will say Harrison is not worrying me. He's going to be fine as a player. I mean, I think the expectations were very high for him, but no one is feasting in this offense. His drops are a problem. I'm not there yet. I think there's been some drops that you want to see him be better about that, but there's also been some stuff that was very contested. I think he's a rookie. I think he's going to be fine. I think it is much more a commentary on where the offense as a whole is and what the play calling and just in general, because no one is feasting. No one is feasting in this offense, at least not the passing game. The running game is doing pretty good, but like Trey McBride, the star we have, he's on pace for like a little bit fewer yards than he had last year. So it's not even like someone is taking all the targets and the catches that should be going to Harrison. No one is feasting in the passing game. And I don't think that's all on Harrison. I'm not worried. The talent's there. He's going to be fine. They'll get it figured out. So I am not worried long term. Short term, they got to get some things figured out though. It's been disappointing short term, no doubt. He's going to be a great player. I'm not at all worried about that. So getting to Kyler. In fact, let's take his, kind of bring up the player profile. Let's go to the passing, which brings up a few more things. So I talked about it earlier. Such a good defense, and that they played against, and so I'm giving him a little bit of grace on that. I know some people, so you always give him very grace. Maybe I do, but I see the talent. I see what he does. I see, and the eye test to me says. He does some things that very few, if no other quarterbacks can do. He makes some mistakes, but every quarterback makes those sometimes. So, but this was the degree of difficulty was very high against this defense. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass here. The run grade was his best of the season, 89, which really buoyed his overall grade, right? And that play was, they don't win the game without that touchdown run. So, he didn't have any big time throws or turnover worthy plays. I know there was one turnover, but I think the tip, they account for that and that's, otherwise it wouldn't have been that. The average depth of target, 5.9. This was the lowest of the season, right? Which tells you they were having to they weren't taking deep shots. And I think part of that though was the defense they were playing, he wasn't getting time to take those deep shots. And they talked about the pressure. His time to throw was 2.77 seconds, which is not the lowest of the season, but it's one of the lower. There's a couple that were lower. So he was getting the ball out quickly with a low average depth of target. But they weren't, they didn't get any sacks on him. So I really think that a lot of this was kind of the game script was a stingy defense that puts good pressure on you, so you have to get the ball out, but also does other things well on defense and makes it hard to get those deep plays. And I think that is a philosophy. That team's trying to win by grinding out games. That's why they drafted Joe Alt. That's why they have this great quarterback, but he's not putting up tons of yards every week in and week out. He had 300 yards this week, the Chargers quarterback, but Justin Herbert, but he hasn't been doing that every week, right? You look at if you've looked at him in fantasy, you see that he's not putting up big numbers, and that's I think the Chargers team is I think the way they play is to grind it out, and I think their defense philosophy is also to limit what you do in terms of the big plays. So Kyler's, listen, it wasn't the best Kyler game. There were a few bad throws here and there. But he was also under a lot of duress and he made some plays and he didn't, that when a couple of big plays that really mattered and he didn't make the big mistakes. Daniel Correa saying, I believe Marvin Harrison Jr. is frustrated by the fact that he isn't being involved in the offense. Petzing needs to lose his job. Josh Gugeri. I'm sorry. I know I'm totally butchering your name. I apologize for that. I'm worried about the receivers in general, not just Marvin Harrison Jr. The number of drops by receivers this year is crazy to me. Yeah, I looked at this like Marvin Harrison Jr. They, PFF in terms of uh, drops, and let me get to, you got to get to the receiving. There's contested catches, there's contested plays that you don't pull in, and then there's drops, and those are different things. Like a drop, is like when it hits your hands uncontested, you should have it. And they actually only have like recorded one actual true drop they should that where it was uncontested, kind of like that. So that's when I say I don't think it's quite what people are saying. I mean, yes, I want to see him come down with some of those contested catches, but I don't think it's quite as bad as people are saying. But I don't think it's the receivers. I really don't. I mean, Marvin Harrison is a rookie. He'll maybe he's got a little bit of kind of getting up to speed to get there. But I think it's the offense overall. I think it's Petzing's offense. He needs to get some things figured out, and I don't think it's on the receivers really directly. I think they're, again, I don't want to spend the whole stream talking about that. I know people disagree with me on that, and that's okay. And good win against number one scoring defense, but we got to get Marvin Harrison Jr. involved. Petzing has kind of disappointed me this season. Yeah, I mean, definitely want to see him more involved. And again, I do think Petzing is kind of where a lot of the issues lie, right? All right, so getting off of the offensive side and getting to the defensive side, right? So looking at the defense, Dennis Gardeck out for the season. So sad about that. Obviously we love the Barbarian. He's been such a great player for us, such a gritty player. And in a team that already was very lacking in the pass rush department, and he was one of our better pass rushers. To lose him obviously is a concern. And I know a lot of people talking about, are we going to trade for pass rusher before the trade deadline? And I've been kind of resistant to like the trade thing, because I like the approach of building and letting your young guys get snaps, and so that next year, like they've had, so that they've had some more experience. But I am at the point now where I would like to see them make a trade for someone. I don't want to see them go like all out for the big trade that's going to cost a lot of cap space. I want them to keep their cap space to sign and extend their own homegrown talent. But I wouldn't mind seeing them bring in a veteran pass rusher, someone who's maybe going to be someone who's not going to like the Hassan Reddick idea. He obviously, that's no longer on the table. Like him as a player, but I was never really on board with going after Hassan Reddick, because I just thought you were committing too much of your cap to him. I'd rather get someone who's going to be more of a short-term, 1 or 2 year, not as big of a cap hit, just someone to kind of upgrade the unit a bit. But I want them to draft and develop the guy. I want BJ Ojulari to come back next year, and I want him to get some snaps. I want Darius Robinson to be part of that pass rush, and I want them to draft an edge in the first round next year, who is going to be their alpha edge rusher, and I want them to develop and pay that guy. I don't want them to spend a bunch of money on a veteran right now, but getting someone who's kind of a decent player, who may be more of a temporary kind of fix. I'm definitely up for that. Jonathan saying Monty has to feel the need to upgrade edge now. I have to imagine he does. And Jonathan saying Ojulari Uche would be a nice re-sign to deal Simmons. And yeah, like if you could, pull that off, right? That's more in the range of what I'm looking, right? Uche, Josh Uche, and BJ, are you talking about Aziz Ojulari? Maybe going after him, right? So yeah. So going back to the defense, let's bring up coverage snaps to get kind of the defensive back starting there. Starling Thomas, he had an overall a decent game. The coverage grade wasn't the greatest, but this is his run defense and tackling were pretty solid. This is Starling Thomas, right? His grades are always kind of very average-ish, but he's not making the big mistakes typically. And he obviously made the big play, forcing that fumble, right? In yesterday's game. But you look at his grades, he had one really bad game against Washington. That wasn't a great game for anyone really. But he's been kind of very good, a couple good games and a lot of very in that right around average, and overall grade of 62.4. And, that's for an undrafted rookie free agent that they're developing. You didn't, that's solid. I'll take that on the roster, right? You want to see some guys step up and play better and take that job, but Starling Thomas is, has been a pleasant surprise at being kind of a very stable player at the position, right? Jalen Thompson had a nice game, 74.1, 71.5 coverage. This is 3 games in a row for him that have been good. He really struggled coming out of the gate, right? First 2 games weren't real good, had an okay game against Detroit, then struggled against Washington. But these last 3 games, you see 65, 68, 74.1. So I'm hopeful that this is, Jalen Thompson really kind of hitting his stride for the season. His overall grade is 62.6. Still want to see him bring that up. But, you see he's been better than that throughout his career, right? This is his worst grade season-wise, at all for his career. So want to see him continue to string these kinds of games together and bring that grade up. So love seeing him having another nice game, 3 in a row. Garrett Williams, had a solid game. His coverage grade was okay. That brought it down a little bit. Pass rush grade really doesn't figure in a whole lot for a cornerback. 65.4 though. Again, this is a guy that we love, right? He's been their slot corner. He's been consistent. He struggled in Detroit, but aside from that, he's been pretty consistent. Overall grade of 69.4. That's really solid, right? So the former 3rd-round pick has just really solidified himself as a really key part of this defense and a great Monty Austin Fort draft pick, right? Let's continue to go through the cornerbacks and we'll get to the other positions now. Max Milton. This was his worst game grade-wise of the season by a bit. 29.0, 28.3 coverage grade. This was the most snaps he's seen. And listen, I tweeted last week about how I wanted to see them throw him into the water and see if he can swim because, Murphy Bunting hasn't been cutting it, right? Well, I got my wish, and he sank like a rock. He had that one really nice play on the sideline that I definitely remember, that knock away the pass, so one really nice play, but he struggled aside from that. He's a rookie. Want to see him get, he's had some really good games and some really bad games. So I want to see him improve and get more consistent. But was disappointed in seeing that, right? Let's see. Rabbit had on 2 snaps. That's really kind of nothing to really kind of speak about there. I missed Buddha. How can I miss Buddha? Okay. Buddha Baker, 65.3, solid game for him. He's been solid this year. I think last week was a bad week for him. But Buddha's Buddha, right? He's 69.3 overall. And they ask a lot of him. So sometimes that grade is not reflective of his impact, right? Because the degree of difficulty of what he's asked for is higher often because of the role he plays. So even the grade is a little bit, suppressed because of that. So I think that's all the defensive backs. So let's get into let's look at let's look at the inside linebackers and then we'll get to the defensive line and edge rusher. So Kaiser White, best game of the year for him. He's struggled this year. He struggled mightily, and he's come back from injury. So seeing a good game from him, especially look at the 91.3 run grade, really like seeing that. And if you look, it's not been pretty, right? His best grade up to this point was a 60.6. So that 73.8 is a breath of fresh air. We need to see him string together some more good games. Here's hoping that this is, him getting back, healthy, right? But you like seeing that from Kaiser White. Chris Barnes, not a great game from him. The coverage grade was really low. This season he's been up and down. Right? He's had some decent games, but some bad games, and this is who he is, right? He's kind of a journeyman, player. And then we got to find Mac Wilson, who is he probably snap-wise ended up. Yep, as an outside linebacker, even though he's kind of more of that inside linebacker. Not his best game, but it wasn't terrible, right? 63. He's had better games and worse games, right? But 68.5 overall grade. Been a great signing. He has really, really been pretty well stabilizing that inside linebacker spot. So good overall. All right, so let's now look at let's go with the edge rushers. Zaven had a really nice game. 80 overall grade, run defense 72.9, tackling 74.7. His best pass rush grade of the season, 65.7. He didn't get any sacks, but he had 3 total pressures, and that matters, right? And a 77.1 coverage grade. And I want to look at, like, he has been really good. He had, the LA game wasn't great for him, but he's been really good, and Green Bay. But overall, he's been really good this year. And you look at his overall grade, 75.2, his best grade of his career, right? Run defense, 88.7. I know you look at these run defense grades, like, how's that add up? Well, I've talked about this before. I think they look at some consistency things, having multiple 80s and 70 games. He had a couple lower games, but for whatever reason in their formula, that boosted up. Coverage grade, same thing, like, that's just a remarkable coverage and run defense grade, especially for an edge rush, and I know we talk about he plays sort of a hybrid sort of a thing there, but he's been solid, right? Love Zaven, love the extension that they signed him to. And you see his best pass rush grade of the season. It had the 3 hurries. So nice game from Zaven. Getting to, we were talking about Mac Wilson, Julian Okwara, not a great game from him. He's been just sort of a guy that he had 1 pressure. He hasn't put up any, I don't think he has any sacks this year, 3 pressures. He's been up and down grade wise. He's just their pass rush depth edge rush depth is really struggling, and he's having to play a lot for them, right? Gardeck had a nice game until he got injured, right? So 22 snaps, had 2 pressures, good grades pretty well across the board. So we're going to miss him. Lucada, not the best game, right? 55.3. Let's see. I think that's all the edge rushers, right? So, edge continues to be an area of need, no doubt, right? But let's look at the defensive line, because there's a couple of things I want to kind of point out here. Stills 61.2. He has struggled. He hasn't had any great games this year, but he's been had a couple right around average. Want to see more from him, better from him. Loved him in his rookie year. Hopefully he can kind of start to get a little bit better there. Ben, is it Stilley or Still? I heard them pronounce it on the broadcast. I think Stilley. It's a guy they signed, kind of a depth guy. 64.8 grade, solid grade. Had a decent game. This is a guy, undrafted free agent at 2022. Has been around for a few years. Was with us last year. Played them in snaps between Tampa Bay and Arizona this year. So, kind of a practice squad kind of guy. Bubble roster kind of a guy. But it's fine. It was 27 snaps, 64 points. So that's a decent grade, right? When you think about what we've been getting out of our defensive linemen, that's actually pretty good, sadly. Look at now, Naquan Jones is a guy I want to kind of look at here, because I tweeted about him last week. He had a nice game last week. And this is a guy that I'll be honest, I haven't been real high on, because if you look at his grade, this is a guy that's one of those guys that when you talk about players who you feel like, okay, this is a bubble roster practice squad guy who's having to play for the Cardinals because, having to play snaps because they don't have great depth. That, was an undrafted free agent in 2021. And like, if you look at through his career, when I say those things about, I'm not trying to hate on him, but you look at like his grades, with Tennessee and then, Tennessee and Arizona, throughout his career up until this year have been in the 40s. That's not good, right? Good. Decent tackling grades there, but just like, so I'm not trying to hate on him, but he hasn't shown that he, up to this point in his career, that he's a guy who you even want starting, right? Based on his grades. But like, and his first game against San Francisco wasn't great, but he's strung together 2 really nice games against Green Bay, right? 74.9. And then here against the Chargers had that sack, right? But it's not just he had 1 sack. He had 3 pressures this game, 2 the last game, right? He's got 2 sacks this year and 6 pressures. So it's not, it's not just that he's just got lucked into a couple sacks. And, there's also been other pressures going on. So I'm just keeping an eye on this guy. I mean, again, the historical track record doesn't tell you this is who he has been. Maybe he's figuring something out. Again, it's only 2 games, so we got to see more of it. But with the defensive line that's really struggling, to get someone, if you get someone to kind of become a better player, more of a player than you thought, that's certainly a help, right? So we got Naquan Jones. Tonga, had a decent game on 14 snaps. He's been pretty good for the Cardinals this year. You look at throughout his games, he's had some really nice games, a couple lower, but yeah, overall 70.6 grade. This has been a really nice signing. And if you look at through his career, he's been that guy, right? Nose tackle, limited snaps because that's what nose tackles get. And, with Minnesota was effective, right? And he's showing that here. So like seeing that. Lopez didn't have a great game. He's been struggling. We talked coming into the season, we loved Lopez and the coaching staff loved Lopez and still love what he brings effort-wise. And he was really good last year for 65.4 PFF grade, for kind of a former 6th-round pick. But he had a nice game against Buffalo starting off, but it's been really not great this year, right, since then. So we'll hope that he can kind of get things going again. Let's see. And I think that's all of them. So, it was a gritty win, right? It was a very hard fought win. We had some nice performances and some not so great performances. Coley Jack saying, why not use Tip as a fullback? It's a good question. I think they like to use a lot of 3 tight end sets and 2 and 3 tight end sets, and they move those guys around. So sometimes he does end up kind of getting a little bit of a fullback kind of thing. But for whatever reason, I think their offense goes more with the multiple tight end sets than the fullback, like kind of a thing. So for whatever, yes, I think here's what I will say. If in plays where they're going to have a fullback, he's probably going to be the guy that they'll use a lot of those times. But I think it's probably just more of an offensive philosophy thing. They really want to kind of go heavy on those tight ends and set up that way because of what that does to create matchup problems. But not a lot of teams don't use tight end or fullbacks, and if they do, a lot of times they move them around a bit. And sometimes you have teams that have tight ends that play as fullbacks. So the short answer is it seems like that's not their offense is more tight end heavy than fullback heavy is my sense. But Ant saying, I'm shocked our run defense was so good. Yeah, it hasn't been good this year overall, not a great run defense. But they were stout, did a good job overall. I mean, let's see. The Chargers had 59 yards rushing, right? And 2.7 yard average. So they did, really nice job against the run right this week. So that's how the game played out, and really glad to see a win for the Cardinals. It was a hard fought win. It was ugly, but that's the Chargers. So, this team is 3-4, second place in the division, and their offense hasn't been living up to expectations. So, there's reason to believe this team, this offense can and will get better, and there's reason to believe the team overall will start to play better. I mean, they have to show it, but it's if their offense is not living up to is underperforming, which tells you there's upside there. We got to see. I'm worried about Petzing in terms of the passing game, and that's the kind of thing that gives me pause. So here's hoping they kind of figure some of that out. So, all right. Real quick, we'll look at the chart or look at the Chargers grades. Herbert had a really high grade, right? Really efficient, though, a lot of yards, no touchdowns, right? Palmer had a nice game for them. The receiver, Joe Alt, the rookie, really good. Disley, he was tearing it up, right? Overall, Zion Johnson, so they had some players with some nice grades. The receiver struggled, right? Everyone seemed to struggle receiver-wise. Looking at the defense, Khalil Mack had a really nice grade, right? I took this off the screen. Sorry. Let me show that again. Sorry. Herbert, really good grade for him. Palmer, Joe Alt, right? Disley, right? So the receiver's not so great. Khalil Mack, great, really high grade for him. Didn't get any sacks, but got a lot of pressures, right? Perryman, had a nice game. Ford, Derwin James, they've got some good players on defense, right? But down here, the edge rusher Tuia Paluto, I'm sure I butchered that, not great. And Junior Colson, poor guy. He was on the wrong end of the Kyler Murray run, right? And his grade wasn't great. So you had some guys with some not great, pretty bad grades down there. So, and then finally, we'll look at the team. Overall, look at the lineup. For the Cardinals, you've got the offensive line. That again, we've talked about this. This is much improved from what we've had in the past with the team. You used to see some dark orange, and reds in there sometimes, and so offensive line has been stabilized. I'd like to see it continue to grow and get better, but it's been stabilized. The receiver grades, want to see those get better, right? Murray, Connor, right? It's decent. Want to see Murray's improve. On the defensive side, the defense has been, it's the area where we know this team needs to improve and build and needs some more talent, but like the floor's raising a little bit. They this was a nice performance for them, and they've had a couple of nice games, but also, they're not a good defense. They're a defense that's young and needs some more talent, but they've had some good games, and some of these players are just starting to, get a little bit better. You see Thompson's grades are going up a little bit, right? And Sterling Thomas has been kind of solid, right? And you're bringing up the nickel, there's Williams has been solid. So it's not, you want to see better, but it's creeped up to be a little better than it was in the past. So, this is a team, year 2 of a rebuild. We talked about it. They've got work to do. Want to see them continue to get that off, trying to figure out that offense. But a win is a win, and this team is 3-4. I think we all would have signed up for 3-4, 7 games in, looking at the schedule, knowing we know about this team. So I know some of the games have been discouraging, but there's been a lot of that in the league this year. So in fact, I took some time. I looked at all the teams real quick, and I look at their wins and losses. And the Cardinals are not the only team that have had some ugly losses, multiple ugly losses, and some good wins. There's that variance is there everywhere. So, all right, well, we're going to get out of here. I'm going to put up the channel member shout outs, and I want to thank you all for hanging out with us. It's a win. Obviously it's always more fun when there's a win. One quick programming note. I have something next Tuesday. I'm giving a talk at my university. So the Making the Grade live stream will probably be a different night. I'll get that out, but it won't be Tuesday next week just because I have a prior obligation. But thank you all for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time. And here's hoping we get another win to look at. Go Cards.
Hey, yo, it's Joe. He's the host of Mock Draft Monday on the Cardinals Show. So join the live, hit like and subscribe. Enjoy the podcast tonight. Enjoy the podcast tonight.